I tossed and turned, watching the sleeping silhouette beside me. Sophie, my wife, my whole world. A sliver of morning sun cut through a gap in the curtains, tracing a soft curve across her shoulder. We'd been married for 3 years, but the sight of her sleeping still made my heart ache in the best way. Her long hair was a dark spill on the pillow, her breathing even and quiet. I gently stroked a strand, careful not to wake her from what I hoped was a beautiful dream. She'd worked late again last night, pushing to finish a big illustration contract. She was a brilliant illustrator, with a talent I admired and a success I was proud of. The alarm went off. She winced, her eyes slowly fluttering open. When she saw me watching her, the corners of her mouth lifted into a faint smile. "Ethan," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "Are you watching me sleep again?" I leaned in and kissed her forehead. "How can I not? It's the best view in the world." She gave my arm a light shove and sat up, laughing. "Stop being so cheesy. Go get ready. I'll make you breakfast." This was our life. Simple but happy. I'm an architect. I'd recently wrapped up a major project that was getting a lot of buzz in the industry. And Sophie, or Soph, as I called her, was the gifted artist. Our lives were busy, but they were full and good. In the kitchen, the sight of her in an apron, her back to me as she worked, filled me with a profound sense of peace. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, inhaling the faint scent of her shampoo. "Hey, are you free next Saturday night?" she asked, flipping the eggs in the pan. "I have a college reunion, and I'd love for you to come with me." "Of course. It's not often you volunteer to drag me to a party," I answered with a smile. Sophie wasn't a big social butterfly. She preferred a quiet night at home, drawing or reading. She slid the eggs onto a plate and turned to face me. "There's someone who really wants to meet you. A good friend of mine from college. He just moved back from overseas to start his own company. He's doing really well." "Oh, sounds like a big shot. What's his name? I should do my homework," I joked. "Sean Hayes." Her tone shifted just slightly, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. "He was one of my best friends in school. We lost touch after he moved abroad. He's back now. And when he heard I was married, he said he was dying to meet you." "No problem. It'll be nice to finally meet your college crew," I said, taking the plate she offered, my heart full of a simple, happy anticipation. How naive I was. If I could go back to that moment, I would have seen the warning signs. I would have refused that seemingly innocent invitation. But that's how fate works. It plants the seeds of disaster when you're least expecting it. On Saturday night, we arrived at a sleek, upscale restaurant in the heart of the city. Sophie had clearly made an effort. She wore a deep blue dress I'd never seen before, and she'd had her hair professionally styled. "You look stunning," I said, and I meant it. She seemed a little nervous, constantly adjusting her hemline or touching her hair. "You think? It's been a while since I've seen these people. I wanted to make you proud." There were already 7 or 8 people in the private dining room. As we walked in, a tall, well-built man immediately stood up and approached us. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, and every movement exuded an air of confidence and success. "Sophie, it's been too long." His voice was deep and resonant, his eyes fixed on my wife before they finally turned to me. He extended a hand. "Hi, you must be Ethan. I'm Sean Hayes, a friend of Sophie's from college." "Nice to meet you," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was a little stronger than necessary. "Sophie's told me a lot about you. Said you're a brilliant architect," he said with a smile, but his eyes were assessing me. I paused for a second. "That's funny. I don't think I've ever heard her mention a college friend named Sean." The atmosphere turned awkward for a beat. Sophie jumped in to smooth it over. "I have. You probably just forgot. Sean was our student government president. He runs his own tech startup now." "Oh, right. Now I remember." I lied, just to ease the tension. Sean led us to the table, pointedly seating Sophie next to him, with me on her other side. Throughout the dinner, he monopolized her attention, talking endlessly about their shared memories from college. I sat right there, but I felt like I was a million miles away. What made me most uncomfortable was the look in his eyes when he watched her, an emotion I couldn't quite name, but it wasn't friendship. "Remember that time we pulled an all-nighter on that design project?" Sean said, his tone overly familiar. "You fell asleep right at the drafting table. You were even drooling a little." Sophie blushed and nudged him playfully. "Stop it. I did not drool. The easy, natural way they interacted set my teeth on edge. I leaned closer to Sophie and whispered, "You two were close?" "Just classmates," she said, a little too quickly, before taking a sip of water. The party went late, and I noticed Sean's gaze followed Sophie all night. Before we left, he took her hand. "Don't be a stranger this time. Let's connect on WhatsApp." In the car on the way home, Sophie seemed to be in high spirits, which only fueled my unease. "So, you and the Sean guy," I said, try to sound casual. "You're sure you're just classmates?" Her expression tightened for a split second before she smiled at me. "Of course. What's wrong? Are you jealous?" "The way he looks at you. It's not right," I said bluntly. She shook her head. "You're overthinking it. He's like that with everyone really outgoing. Besides," she said, taking my hand, "I'm a married woman now. What do you have to worry about?" I managed to smile and nodded, letting it drop. But that night, a strange sense of dread began to fester deep inside me. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe it was instinct. I didn't know it then, but that feeling would only grow in the coming days, until it threatened to swallow our seemingly perfect marriage whole. 3 inches the month following the reunion, I started noticing small changes in Sophie. She rarely wore makeup before. Now she spent time on it every morning. She used to work from her home studio most days. Now she was constantly out, citing client meetings or industry events. She used to ignore her phone. Now she was always picking it up, a faint smile playing on her lips as she texted. The changes were subtle, but they were there, like ice melting in spring, altering the entire landscape before you even realize it. One night, we were watching TV on the couch when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, immediately stood up, and walked out to the balcony to take the call. Through the glass door, I could see her smiling as she talked, a light in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. When she came back inside, I tried to sound casual. "Who was that calling so late?" "Just a client," she said without meeting my eyes. "Some last-minute changes on a project that's due tomorrow." I nodded and didn't press further. The next morning, she told me she had a girls' night planned and would be home late. I said okay and watched as she got ready with extra care, even spritzing on the expensive perfume she saved for special occasions. An unnamed anxiety gnawed at me all day. That evening, home alone, I decided to organize our closet to distract myself. As I opened her side, a beautifully wrapped gift box caught my eye. Inside was a pricey silk scarf. Tucked beneath, it was a small card. "For the most beautiful woman. Can't wait to see you again." It was signed. My heart went cold. Who was S? Sophie had never mentioned receiving a gift like this. I put everything back exactly as I found it, pretending I hadn't seen a thing, but a seed of doubt had been firmly planted. Sophie didn't get home until nearly midnight. She smelled faintly of alcohol and a perfume that wasn't the one she'd put on that morning. "Have a good time?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Yeah, it was great. We hadn't seen each other in forever, so we had a lot to catch up on," she replied, avoiding my gaze as she headed for the bathroom. I lay in bed, listening to the shower run, my mind racing through 100 different scenarios. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was an innocent gift. Maybe S stood for someone else. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, the feeling of dread wouldn't go away. In the following weeks, Sophie's late nights at work and girls' nights out became more frequent. Once I called her best friend, Jen, to ask if she was with Sophie. Jen sounded confused, saying they hadn't seen each other in ages. When I mentioned it to Sophie, she looked panicked for a second before explaining that she was actually meeting a potential new client and had lied because she didn't want me to worry. I accepted her explanation, but the knot of suspicion in my gut tightened. One evening, while Sophie was in the shower, her phone lit up with a notification on the nightstand. I never looked at her phone, but the message preview was impossible to ignore. "Had a great time today. Thinking of you." The sender was S. Work. Reading those words, it felt like an invisible hand had clamped around my heart, squeezing until I couldn't breathe. S. That mysterious S again. Sean's name flashed in my mind, but I pushed it away. No, Sophie wouldn't do that to me. There had to be another explanation. I didn't tell her I saw the message. I chose to trust her, to trust our marriage. Looking back now, that blind faith seems almost laughable. Sometimes the deepest cuts don't come from your enemies, but from the person you trust the most. On a Saturday morning, while Sophie was still asleep, I was tidying up the bedroom. Kneeling down, I reached under the bed for an old shoebox I meant to move to the storage closet. My fingers brushed against something else. I pulled out. My blood ran cold. It was an unopened box of condoms that we hadn't used them in 2 years, not since we started Try for a Baby. I sat there on the floor, the small box in my hand, my world spinning off its axis. A dozen possibilities stormed my mind, but only one made any sense. Sophie was seeing someone else. "Ethan, what are you looking for?" Her sleepy voice came from the bed. I quickly shoved the box back under the bed and turned to her, forcing my face into a neutral expression. "Nothing, just dusting. Go back to sleep." She rubbed her eyes and smiled. "You and your neat freak tendencies. It's the weekend, relax." She closed her eyes and drifted off again. I stood there, watching her peaceful face, my heart shattering into a million pieces. In that moment, all the little inconsistencies from the past few months clicked into place. The frequent overtime, the secret text, the anonymous scarf, the unfamiliar perfume, the lies about girls' night. All the scattered pieces now formed a single, horrifying picture. But I needed proof. I needed to know the truth. Even if that truth would utterly destroy our marriage, I had to face it. That afternoon, Sophie said she was heading to her studio to get some work done and would probably be late. I nodded, pretending everything was normal. The moment she left, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Well, look who it is. Need a hand?" Rachel Vance's voice on the other end was as cheerful as ever. Rachel was my best friend from college. She was a private investigator now. We hadn't seen each other in a while, but our friendship was solid. "I need your professional help," I said, my voice low and hoarse. "It's about my wife." Her tone shifted instantly. "What's wrong? You don't sound good." "I think she's—" I hesitated, the words catching in my throat like shards of glass. "Having an affair?" She finished for me. "Yes. I need to know for sure. Give me your basic info and recent schedule. I'll look into it." "But Ethan," her voice softened, "are you sure you want to know? The truth is often uglier than you can imagine." "I'm sure," I said, my voice firm. "Whatever it is, I have to know." After hanging up, I sank onto the couch and stared at the wallpaper we'd picked out together, a minimalist geometric pattern that Sophie loved. Our wedding photo hung on the wall. In it, she was smiling so brightly, so genuinely. Back then, our love felt so pure, untouched by any shadows. Had all that purity been stained? I couldn't bear to imagine it, but I knew I had no other choice. Rachel's investigation was fast. She sent the first batch of photos a few days later. In them, Sophie and Sean were at a coffee shop, talking animatedly. They were sitting close, his hand resting on hers, their expressions intimate. Seeing the pictures, my chest tightened. It felt like I was suffocating, but it wasn't definitive proof, I told myself. Maybe it was just an innocent gesture between old friends. I needed more. Rachel called. She told me that according to her research, Sean wasn't just a college classmate. He was Sophie's first love. They had dated for 2 years in college and broke up when he moved abroad for grad school. That information hit me like a physical blow. Sophie had never once mentioned a college boyfriend named Sean, let alone that he was the good friend from the reunion. Sean moved back to the States 6 months ago to launch a startup. "It's doing pretty well," Rachel explained over the phone. "From what I can tell, they reconnected at that alumni event and have been in constant contact ever since." "Are you sure they're involved now?" I asked, the words feeling foreign and heavy in my mouth. "I need more evidence to be certain, but it's not looking good, Ethan." Her voice was laced with sympathy. "Whatever happens, remember you've got friends." "Thanks, I managed to choke out." Over the next few days, I tried to act like everything was normal. But every time I saw Sophie smile at her phone or say she had to meet a client, it felt like a needle piercing my heart. I started noticing even more things. The new clothes and perfume she was buying. The erratic work hours, sometimes coming home late at night, sometimes having a work emergency on a weekend. But the most painful change was in her eyes. When she looked at me, the familiar warmth was gone, replaced by a cool distance I'd never seen before. A week later, Rachel sent the second batch of evidence. It was a series of photos of Sophie and Sean in front of a high-end hotel. That day, Sophie had told me she was going to Austin for a 2-day illustration conference. The date stamp on the photos was from the first day of her supposed trip, and the location was clearly not Austin. It was a luxury hotel right here in Chicago. Looking at those pictures, the world tilted sideways. I had to brace myself against the wall to keep from falling. My wife, the person I loved more than anyone, was lying to me, betraying me. The pain was indescribable, like someone was slowly carving up my heart with a rusty knife. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked, her voice filled with concern. "You wanted to come over?" "No, I'm fine. I just need to be alone for a bit," I croaked. After hanging up, I collapsed onto the living room floor and let the silent tears fall. I thought about our first date, how nervous I was when I handed her a single rose. I thought about my proposal, the way her eyes shimmered with tears as she said yes. I thought about every morning and every evening we had shared since our wedding day. All of those beautiful memories now felt like a cruel mirage. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark. Eventually, as night fell completely, I pulled myself to my feet, wiped my face, and took a deep breath. I decided to give her one last chance. I would confront her. Maybe there was some other explanation. Sophie told me she had to attend a dinner with an important client and would be home very late. I nodded and said I understood. The moment she was out the door, I texted Rachel, asking if she could tail her. "Can't tonight. I'm on a stakeout," Rachel replied, "but I can lend you some gear if you want to go yourself." That afternoon, I went to Rachel's office. She gave me a micro recorder and a few tips on basic surveillance. "Be careful," she warned. "Don't get caught. And if you confirm it, don't do anything stupid." I nodded gratefully and headed out, following the directions Sophie had gone. I'm no but I knew my wife. I had a hunch she'd go to the upscale sushi place she mentioned a few times. Sean had said at the reunion that it was his favorite. Sure enough, when I got there, I saw them through the window, sitting in a quiet corner. They were face to face, and Sean kept reaching across the table to touch Sophie's hand. She didn't pull away. In fact, she was smiling back at him. The intimacy between them was palpable, far beyond that of old friends. I didn't storm in. Instead, I found a discreet spot across the street, put in my earbuds, and aimed the directional microphone Rachel had given me. "Have you really thought about it?" Sean's voice crackled through the receiver. "I know this is hard, but we can't keep going on like this." "I know. I just need more time." Sophie's voice was a mix of confusion and anguish. "It's not fair to Ethan. What about you? What about us?" Sean's voice rose with emotion. "Who's going to give us back all the years we lost?" "Sophie, I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day when I was overseas. All I could think about was you. Now I'm back. Don't we deserve a chance?" After a long pause, Sophie spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I know. I never really forgot you either. But marriage is a lifetime promise. I can't just—" "You made that promise when you didn't know I was coming back," Sean interrupted. "Things are different now. We can start over, just like we always said we would." My heart shattered. Sophie, my wife, had just admitted she'd never forgotten him. And I was just a placeholder, an obstacle. I couldn't listen anymore. I ripped the earbuds out and stumbled away, my mind a blank haze of pain. Back home, I felt like an empty shell. I walked into the bathroom and stared at my own haggard reflection. So this is what betrayal felt like. It was agonizing, hopeless, utterly disempowering. A small sticky note Sophie had left on the mirror caught my eye. It just said, "Love you." A surge of pure rage coursed through me. Lies. It was all lies. Her love, her promises, her vows, all of it was fake. I slammed my fist into the mirror. The glass shattered, cutting my hand. Blood dripped from my knuckles onto the white porcelain sink. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in my chest. When Sophie got home later and saw my bandaged hand, she rushed over, her face etched with worry. "What happened?" I told her I'd cut on a piece of equipment at work. She carefully cleaned and rewrapped the wound, her eyes full of concern. I could only wonder, bitterly, how much of that concern was actually guilt. That night, lying in bed next to her, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept, I made a decision. I wasn't going to give up on our marriage just yet, but I wasn't going to be a fool any longer. I was going to find out everything. And then I would decide what to do next. 07. The following week, my life became a carefully staged performance. On the surface, I was the same loving husband, completely oblivious to my wife's secrets. Inwardly, I was a detective, collecting every clue, piecing together the full picture of Sophie and Sean's affair. Rachel continued her investigation, feeding me more information. According to her findings, Sophie and Sean had been seeing each other for at least 4 months, starting right after that college reunion. That meant they had likely already rekindled their relationship by the time she introduced him to me. The thought made me sick to my stomach. I started checking Sophie's phone and laptop when she wasn't around. I felt ashamed for invading her privacy, but I had to know the whole truth. On her laptop, I found an encrypted folder. After a few tries, I managed to unlock it using one of her usual password combinations. Inside was her private journal. I knew reading someone's journal was a terrible violation, but at this point, I didn't care about the ethics. I needed to understand why our marriage had come to this. The entries were like a knife to the heart. The moment I saw Sean again, it all came rushing back. After all these years, he's still the one who makes my heart race. I know it's wrong. I'm married, but I can't control how I feel. Met with Sean at the coffee shop today. He said he never stopped loving me, not even all those years he was away. I cried when he talked about the promises we made to each other. We promised that no matter what, we'd find each other again someday and never let go. Ethan is a good husband. He's kind, thoughtful, and dependable. I know betraying him is wrong, but when I'm with Sean, I can't find a reason to say no. This feeling is so powerful, so real. It feels like fate. Last night with Sean, I almost told him I was ready to start over with him. But then I came home and saw Ethan in the kitchen making me a late-night snack, and I was flooded with guilt. What do? I love Sean, but I don't want to hurt Ethan. 08. Reading those words, the room started to spin. Sophie clearly stated that she loved Sean. I was just a good husband, someone she didn't want to hurt, but didn't truly love. Our 3 years of marriage meant less to her than a college romance. I shut the laptop and leaned back in the chair, struggling to breathe. The sky outside was a bleak, overcast gray, a perfect reflection of my mood. I never imagined I would learn about my wife's deepest feelings this way. Not from her, but by secretly reading her private thoughts. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel. Got something new. Call me when you can. I stepped out onto the balcony and dialed her number. What did you find? I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. According to my sources, Rachel's tone was all business. Sean and Sophie didn't just recently get back in touch. They've been in contact, off and on, the entire time he was overseas. It just wasn't frequent. It only intensified after he moved back. You're saying she knew where he was this whole time? The words were a fresh stab of pain. Yes, and from what I've gathered from an inside source at his company, he told his close friends that she was one of the main reasons he came back. He said he was going to win back his first love. That piece of information was the final, fatal blow. Sean's return had been a calculated move, and Sophie, my wife, had likely been waiting for it. There's one more thing, Rachel said, hesitating for a moment. While I was digging into Sean's company, I found some red flags. They've been cutting corners on product development, and there are some questionable accounting practices. If someone were to dig deeper, they might find regulatory violations, maybe even illegal activity. Could be useful to you. I was silent for a moment. Send me a detailed report on everything you have. Ethan, Rachel's voice softened. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I said honestly. My mind was a tangled mess of grief and rage. I couldn't think straight. Whatever you decide, protect yourself. And if you need to talk, I'm here. After he hung up, I stood on the balcony, watching the distant city skyline. A light rain began to fall, blurring the view, much like my own vision of the future. Was our 3-year marriage really over just like that? Our vows, her promises to me, my absolute devotion to her. Had it all been a lie? I heard the front door open. Sophie was home. I quickly composed myself and turned to face her as she came out to the balcony. What are you doing out here? She asked, her tone light and casual. It's raining, you'll catch a cold. Just thinking, I said, forcing a smile. She came and stood beside me, looking out at the city. What are you thinking about so seriously? I was just thinking about how little control we have over our lives, I said softly. Sometimes, the things we think we're holding on to so tightly can just slip through our fingers. She turned to look at me, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. Why so philosophical all of a sudden? Trouble at work? I shook my head. No, just a random thought. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Well, don't think too much. You've got me. I didn't respond. I just watched the raindrops trace paths down the glass. Her words, which once would have brought me endless comfort, now sent a chill straight through my soul. 09. That Saturday morning, Sophie announced she needed to spend the entire day at her studio organizing some materials. I nodded, telling her I had some blueprints to finish up at home anyway. After she left, I sat in my home office, contemplating my next move. The report Rachel sent about Sean's company detailed potential fraud in his fundraising rounds and false advertising in his product marketing. While it might not be enough for a major criminal case, if it went public, it would be devastating to his reputation and his company. I hesitated to use it. As much as I hated Sean, a part of me still hoped Sophie would come to me, confess everything, and give us a chance to save our marriage. But every day I spent waiting, every moment I spent biting my tongue, chipped away at my resolve and my dignity. That afternoon, I decided to drive out to Rachel's place on the other side of town to talk it through with her in person. She lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. When I arrived, she had tea ready. "You look exhausted," she said bluntly, handing me a mug. I shook my head. "I can't sleep, can't eat. I feel like I don't even know myself anymore." "It's a normal reaction. Anyone in your shoes would feel the same," she said gently. "So, have you decided what to do?" I took a deep breath. I'm going to talk to her. Give her a chance to tell me the truth. If she's willing to end things with him, maybe we can still fix this. Rachel frowned. "Are you sure? Even if she admits it and apologizes, can you ever really move past it? Once trust is broken, it's almost impossible to rebuild." "I don't know," I admitted, "but I love her. I have to at least give our marriage that one chance." "And what about Sean? You're just going to let him get away with it?" I was silent for a moment. If Sophie chooses to start over with me, then yes, I can let it go. But if she chooses him, my voice turned to ice. Then I'll make them both pay. Rachel nodded, not judging my decision. "I get it. But whatever happens, don't let revenge consume you." Just then my phone rang. It was Sophie. I hesitated, then answered. "Ethan, where are you? I came home and you weren't here." She sounded a little anxious. "I'm out with a friend," I said vaguely. "What's up?" "Nothing, I think we need to talk." My heart hammered in my chest. Was this it? Was she finally going to confess? "Okay, I'm on my way home now." I hung up and looked at Rachel. "She wants to talk. Maybe this is your chance," Rachel said encouragingly. "No matter what, remember I'm here for you." On the drive home, I tried to keep my emotions in check. Maybe Sophie had a crisis of conscience and decided to end the affair. Maybe she was just going to spin more lies. Or, in the worst-case scenario, maybe she had made her choice and it wasn't me. Whatever it was, I had to be ready. It was dark by the time I got home. The house was dim, lit only by a pair of candles on the dining room table. Sophie was standing there, wearing one of my favorite dresses. She was smiling, but her eyes were full of unease. "What's all this?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Today is the 7th anniversary of the day we met," she said softly. "Did you forget?" I froze. She was right. 7 years ago today, we'd met at a friend's party. We celebrated it every year. But this year, with everything that had happened, I had completely forgotten. "I'm sorry," I said honestly. "I've been so swamped with work, it totally slipped my mind." "It's okay," she said, walking over and giving me a gentle hug. "I made dinner. I thought we could have a nice talk." We sat down. Sophie poured 2 glasses of red wine, her eyes darting toward me, gauging my reaction. "You seemed really off lately," she began. "Is the pressure at work getting to you?" I looked into her eyes, the same eyes I had fallen in love with, now filled with an emotion I couldn't read. "It's not work," I said slowly. "Sophie, there's something I need to ask you." Her body tensed, but she quickly composed herself. "What is it? You've been going out a lot lately. Is it really all for work?" Her gaze flickered for a second. Then she forced a smile. "Of course it is. What else would it be for?" "Nothing else." I pressed. "No one else." Her smile froze on her face. Her expression turned pale. Are you accusing me of cheating on you?" I didn't answer directly. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the photos Rachel had given me, and laid them on the table. The photos of her and Sean embracing in front of the hotel. Sophie stared at the pictures, her face draining of all color, turning a sickly, ashen gray. "You had me followed?" she whispered, her voice sharp with accusation. I just wanted the truth, I said calmly. Tell me, Sophie, what is going on between you and Sean? She was silent for a long time, tears slowly tracing paths down her cheeks. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. He and I, we dated before. In college. I know. Your first love? I said. But what about now? She looked up, her eyes filled with a tortured conflict. Ethan, I'm so confused. I don't know what to do. When Sean came back, all the old feelings just came back. I don't think I ever really got over him. Her words were a dagger straight through my heart. So you've been lying to me this whole time, all the times you said you loved me, all the promises. Was any of it real? No, that's not it, she said frantically. I do love you. I really do. But Sean, he's different. There's this connection between us that I can't explain. It's like we were meant to be. I let out a bitter laugh. Meant to be. So you cheated on me because of destiny. I didn't cheat, she cried. We just talked, caught up on old times. At a hotel. I cut her off, pulling another photo from my pocket, this one of them walking into the hotel lobby. Sophie, stop lying. This is far more than just talking. She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But when Sean came back, I just couldn't resist him. We have so much history. He knows everything about me, all my dreams. And I don't. The rage I've been suppressing finally boiled over. For 3 years, I've done nothing but try to make you happy. I know every single one of your moods, your habits, your favorite things. I thought we were soulmates. But in your eyes, I'll never measure up to some college boyfriend. It's not like that, she sobbed, shaking her head. I do love you, but what? I demanded. But you love him more. But you want to be with him. She fell silent. Her silence was more damning than any words could ever be. Finally, she whispered, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I took a deep breath, fighting for control. Sophie, I'm going to give you a choice. If you're willing to cut all ties with Sean, we could try to work through this. But if you choose him, then we are done. She looked up, her face streaked with tears. Can you ever forgive me? I don't know. I answered honestly, but I'm willing to try. She was quiet for a long time. At last, she whispered, Can you just give me some time? I need to think. I stood up, looking down at her. You have 3 days. After 3 days, if I don't have an answer from you, I'll make the decision for both of us. With that, I turned and walked into the guest room, leaving her alone at the table. That night, I didn't sleep. I had no idea what she would choose. But I knew that no matter what happened, our marriage would never be the same. The 3 days Sophie took to think were agonizing. She spent most of her time in her studio, and when she was home, she was silent and withdrawn. I, too, was a wreck, torn between my love for her and the burning hatred I felt over her betrayal. On the evening of the 3rd day, Sophie came home early. She was waiting for me on the living room couch. I've made my decision, she said as soon as I walked in. Her voice was low but firm. I choose our marriage. I'll cut off all contact with Sean. I stood there, not reacting. It was the answer I had hoped for, but hearing it, I felt nothing but a profound emptiness. Why? I asked. Why me and not him? She took a deep breath. Because I realized that real love isn't about passion and impulse. It's about the quiet companionship and understanding we share every day. Sean is the past, an impossible fantasy. You, Ethan, you're my present and my future. Are you sure? I pressed. You won't regret this. I'm sure, she said, moving toward me, trying to take my hand. I've already told Sean it's over. Ethan, please just give me a chance to make this right. I didn't pull away, but I didn't take her hand either. It's going to take time to rebuild trust, Sophie. I don't know if I can ever fully get over this, but I'm willing to try. She nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. Thank you. I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. In the days that followed, Sophie did seem to be trying. She canceled all unnecessary outings and worked from home. She shared her schedule with me and even offered me access to her phone and laptop. She cooked my favorite meals and suggested we watch movies together, just like when we were first married. On the surface, I accepted her apologies, but deep down, the feeling of betrayal still festered. Every time I pictured her with Sean, every time I remembered the word from her journal, a toxic mix of anger and jealousy would rise in my throat. I began my own quiet campaign of revenge. I mixed baking soda into undercooked meat to give her stomach cramps. I'd wait until she was asleep and turn down the thermostat, pulling the blanket off her just enough to make sure she'd wake up with a cold. I added a mild irritant to her face wash that made her skin break out. They were small, petty acts of cruelty, but they were all I had. I knew it was childish and despicable, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed an outlet for my pain. I needed her to feel a fraction of the misery I was living with. At the same time, I didn't drop my investigation into Sean. Rachel continued to feed me information about his company, and I started compiling evidence that could destroy him. Through some of my own industry contacts, I managed to get more detailed proof of his company's fraudulent activities. I met Rachel at a coffee shop to go over the new intelligence. Sean's financing is built on a house of cards, she said in a low voice, sliding a folder across the table. He lied to his investors about product performance and market projections. If this gets out, his company will be in serious trouble. I flipped through the documents, a cold satisfaction spreading through me. Is this solid? Ironclad. I've cross-referenced everything. I nodded and put the folder in my briefcase. Thank you, Rachel. This is perfect. She looked at me with concern. Ethan, what are you planning? Revenge might feel good for a minute, but it won't heal you. I know, I said with a bitter smile. But some debts have to be paid. On the way home, I considered my options. I could anonymously tip off the SEC. I could leak the evidence to a financial journalist. I could even contact his investors directly and show them what kind of scam artist they'd given their money to. But I decided to wait. Sophie claimed she had cut ties with Sean, but I didn't fully trust her. With Rachel's help, I installed a tracking app on her phone to monitor her location and call logs. I felt ashamed for stooping so low, but I told myself it was a necessary precaution. A week later, my suspicions were confirmed. The tracking app showed that Sophie had taken a major detour on her way to her studio, ending up at an address I didn't recognize. A quick search revealed it was a small, out-of-the-way coffee shop in an old part of the city. That evening, she came home 2 hours later than usual, explaining that she'd run into a problem at work and had to redo some designs. I nodded and pretended to believe her, but I knew she had lied to me again. The next day, I took a personal day and drove to that coffee shop. And there they were, Sophie and Sean, sitting in a secluded corner, talking and laughing. At one point, Sean reached out and took her hand, and she let him. In that moment, the last shred of hope I had been clinging to dissolved. Her apologies, her promises, her supposed remorse. It was all a lie. She had never chosen me. She had never intended to end it with him. I walked out of the coffee shop, got in my car, and drove home. My mind was eerily calm. The time for indecision was over. Sophie had made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. I was going to make them pay for what they had done to me. Especially Sean, the man who had stolen my wife. That night, I sat at my computer and composed an anonymous email. I attached all the evidence of Sean's corporate fraud and sent it to several major financial news outlets. That was only step one. The next morning, I contacted a few of Sean's key investors, posing as a concerned employee with a conscience, and fed them the same information. Within 3 days, Sean's company was in a full-blown crisis. Multiple publications ran stories about the alleged fraud, investors started pulling out, and the company's valuation plummeted. At the same time, I used my professional network to leak information about technical flaws in his products to his direct competitors, further eroding his market position. Sophie seemed completely oblivious to all of this. She continued her double life, playing the part of the remorseful wife at home while secretly meeting her lover. I watched her, a silent observer, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A week later, Sean's company was on the brink of collapse. The SEC had launched a formal investigation. I listened in on a call between Sophie and Sean. He sounded exhausted and panicked. Things are bad at the company, he told her. I don't know who's behind this, but our investors are bailing and the media is having a field day. Is there anything I can do? Sophie asked, her voice full of concern. Not right now, Sean sighed. I just needed to hear your voice. That's all. I wish I could be there with you. Soon, Sean promised. Once this storm passes, we can finally be together. Hearing them plan their future, a future built on the ruins of my life, filled me with a cold, clear rage. They saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to be discarded. This only strengthened my resolve. I found an excuse to go home early one afternoon. As I suspected, Sophie wasn't there. I used the opportunity to install several hidden cameras and microphones around the house. If she was going to continue to deceive me in my own home, I was going to have proof. A few days later, my chance came. Sophie told me she had to go out of town for a 3-day design expo. I played the part of the supportive husband, but I knew this was her planned getaway with Sean. The day after she left, I met with a top divorce attorney and had him start drawing up the papers. At the same time, I released a new, even more damaging batch of evidence against Sean's company to the press and the SEC, ensuring his professional ruin would be absolute. My plan was proceeding perfectly, but a conversation with Rachel gave me pause. "Ethan, have you thought about what comes after this?" she asked during one of our check-ins. "Revenge might feel good for a moment, but what then?" I was silent for a moment. "I don't know, but I know if I don't do this, I'll regret it for the rest of my life." They thought I was a fool they could play with, a man whose dignity meant nothing. I have to show them that actions have consequences. Rachel sighed. "I understand how you feel. Just don't lose yourself in the process." Her words stuck with me. She was right. Revenge wouldn't heal me, but it would send a message. And for Sophie and Sean, the most painful punishment would be the loss of the things they valued most. For her, her reputation. For him, his success. When Sophie returned from her business trip, I knew it was time for the final act. I discovered that she and Sean were planning to meet again the following week, while I was supposedly away on another business trip. This time, I would be there to shatter their fantasy once and for all. I told Sophie I had to go to Denver for a 3-day architectural conference. She feigned the appropriate amount of disappointment, but I could see the relief in her eyes. "I'll miss you," she said softly as she helped me pack. "I'll miss you too," I replied with a smile, the irony thick in my throat. The morning I was scheduled to leave, I drove off as planned. But instead of heading to the airport, I checked into a hotel on the other side of the city. From my laptop, I watched the live feed from the cameras in our house. Soon after I left, Sophie began to clean, changing the bed sheets, even buying new candles and a bottle of expensive red wine. It was clear she was preparing to entertain her lover in our home. The desecration sent a fresh wave of rage through me, but I forced myself to remain calm. The time was almost right. That evening, the camera feed showed Sean arriving at my front door. He had flowers and a gift. Sophie greeted him with a passionate kiss. They drank wine in the living room, laughing and talking, acting for all the world like this was their home. Eventually, they moved toward the bedroom. I turned off the monitor. I didn't need to see any more. I had all the proof I needed. The next morning, after Sean had left, I watched Sophie on the cameras. She was in a cheerful mood, humming to herself as she erased every trace of his presence. She even sent me a text, asking if my trip was going well. I replied that it was, and that I missed her. The hypocrisy was nauseating. This charade was almost over. I decided to return home a day early and give Sophie a little surprise. But first, I called Rachel and asked for one last favor. I needed to call a few of Sean's most important business partners, posing as a journalist. I explained. "Tell them you're working on an in-depth expose about his company's fraudulent activities. That will put them on high alert," Rachel said, understanding my plan immediately. "They'll likely move to sever all ties with him." Exactly. I want Sean to be on the verge of total collapse when I finally confront Sophie. Rachel was quiet for a moment. "You're really going all the way with this, aren't you?" "Yes," I said, my voice hard as steel. They made their choices. Now, they have to live with the consequences. That evening, I drove home. Sophie's car was in the driveway. The lights were on. I took a deep, steadying breath, then opened the front door. Sophie was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. She looked up, startled. "Ethan, you're back early." "The conference wrapped up ahead of schedule," I said with a smile. "Thought I'd surprise you." She forced a weak smile back. "Well, that's great. I was just making dinner. Are you hungry?" "Starving," I said, walking into the kitchen. I came up behind her and wrapped my arms around her waist. I felt her body go rigid. "What's on the menu?" "Just some pasta," she said, her voice strained. I let her go and walked to the fridge. "Do we have any wine?" "In the wine rack." I pulled out a bottle of red wine and noticed it was a new one, not the half-empty bottle that had been there when I left. She had already disposed of the evidence from her night with Sean. "Special occasion?" I asked casually. "You seem to be pulling out all the stops for dinner." "No reason," she said quickly. Just wanted to have a nice meal for you when you got back. During dinner, we made small talk. She slowly seemed to relax, believing she had gotten away with it. After we finished eating, I suggested we have coffee on the balcony. The cool night air felt good on my face. The city lights twinkled in the distance. Sophie, I began, my voice calm. How long have we been married? 3 years and 4 months, she answered without hesitation. 3 years and 4 months, I repeated. In all that time, I thought I knew you. I thought you knew me. She looked at me, her eyes wary. What's this about, Ethan? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a photograph, laying it on the small table between us. It was a still from the security camera, showing her and Sean kissing passionately at her front door, date stamped 2 nights ago. The color drained from her face. Her hands started to tremble. What? What is this? You know what it is, I said evenly. Just like you know what you've been doing. Ethan, I can explain, don't. I cut her off. I know everything. About you and Sean. About the lies. The betrayal. Tears began to stream down her face. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I swear. I'll end it with him for good. We can start over. Like you promised last time? I sneered. No, Sophie. You're out of chances. I took a thick manila envelope from my briefcase and placed it on the table in front of her. Those are divorce papers. I've already signed my part. Given your infidelity, you won't be getting anything in the settlement. But I won't leak the evidence of your affair. You can keep your reputation. She stared at the envelope in shock, then looked up at me, her eyes wild with fear and desperation. Ethan, you can't. We could talk about this. I can change. It's too late, I said coldly. You made your choice. Now it's time to face the consequences. What about Sean? She suddenly asked. Are you going after him too? A small, cruel smile touched my lips. You'll find out soon enough. Just then, Sophie's phone rang. She looked at me, then hesitantly answered it. It was Sean. His voice was frantic, and though I couldn't make out the words, I could tell from Sophie's horrified expression that the news was not good. After she hung up, she looked even more distraught. Sean said his company is collapsing. All his investors are pulling out, and the press is reporting a massive fraud investigation. Is that so? I feigned surprise. That sounds terrible. She stared at me, a look of dawning horror on her face. It was you. You did this, didn't you? You're destroying us. I didn't deny it. Everyone has to pay for their choices. Sophie, you chose to betray me. Now you get to live with the fallout. You ruined his company, she shrieked. Do you have any idea what that means? Years of his life, his entire dream, gone. And you ruined our marriage, I shot back. 3 years of my life, my trust, my love, all trampled by you. I'd say we're even. Sophie collapsed onto a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. I stood up, looking down at her without an ounce of pity. My lawyer will be here tomorrow afternoon to pick up the signed papers. If you refuse to sign, then the evidence of your affair with Sean goes public. Considering your reputation in the illustration world, I imagine that would be quite damaging to your career. With that, I turned, walked back into the bedroom, and packed a small bag. As I walked out the front door, I took one last look at the weeping woman who had been my wife. I felt nothing. The woman I had loved was gone. This stranger was no longer my problem. I checked into a hotel and began the process of starting my life over. As promised, my lawyer collected the signed divorce papers from Sophie the next day. She didn't contest anything. Meanwhile, Sean's company imploded. The media frenzy was relentless. The SEC investigation uncovered massive fraud, and his investors sued him. In the span of a week, he went from a celebrated tech visionary to a pariah. I learned through Rachel that Sean had tried to lean on Sophie for support, but she had apparently turned on him. When he was on top of the world, she was willing to betray her marriage for the fantasy of a past love. But now that he had nothing, her loyalty vanished. The irony was not lost on me. Once the divorce was finalized, I bought a new condo and threw myself into my work, taking on ambitious new projects to fill the gaping void in my life. About 2 weeks later, I got a text from Sophie. Ethan, I know you probably never want to hear from me again, but please just give me a chance to explain. I deleted it without replying. But she was persistent. The texts and voicemails kept coming. She even showed up in my office building once, but I had security turn her away. Her messages grew increasingly desperate, shifting from excuses to pleas. Ethan, I was wrong. I know that now. Please, just give me one more chance to make it right. I've cut Sean out of my life completely. I realize now that you were the one I loved all along. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want a chance to tell you how sorry I am." I never responded. As far as I was concerned, Sophie was a part of a past I was trying to forget. Nothing she could say would change what she had done. A month later, I saw in the news that Sean's company had officially filed for bankruptcy. He was facing multiple lawsuits and the possibility of jail time. The charismatic, successful man who had destroyed my marriage was now a ruined man. I felt a flicker of triumph, but it was hollow, quickly replaced by a familiar emptiness. The taste of revenge wasn't as sweet as I'd imagined. 2 weeks after that, Rachel asked me to dinner. She was picking at her food, clearly hesitant to say something. Finally, she looked up at me. Sophie jumped. My heart stopped. The glass in my hand nearly slipped. "What?" "Last night, from a roof of her apartment building. She was rushed to the hospital, but the injuries were too severe." Rachel trailed off, but her meaning was clear. I just sat there, the words not fully registering. Sophie was dead. The woman I had shared 3 years of my life with was gone. "Was there a note?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Rachel nodded and pulled an envelope from her purse. "The police found this in her apartment. It's addressed to you." I took the envelope. My hand was shaking. On the front, in her familiar handwriting, were the words, "For Ethan." "Do you want to read it now?" Rachel asked gently. I shook my head and slipped the envelope into my jacket pocket. Later, after dinner, Rachel drove me home. Before she left, she gripped my arm. "Whatever that letter says, you need to remember that this is not your fault. Everyone is responsible for their own choices." I nodded numbly and went inside my empty apartment. I sat on the couch for a long time before I finally found the courage to open the letter. "My dearest Ethan, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. First, I need to say I am so deeply, truly sorry for the pain I caused you. I betrayed your love and your trust, and I made a mistake that can never be forgiven. I've been trying to understand how I let this happen. Maybe it's because I never really grew up, always clinging to a fantasy from my past. Maybe I was just too selfish to appreciate the happiness I had right in front of me. Or maybe I was just weak. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. I hurt you, and I can never take that back. Sean has left the city. With his company gone and his reputation destroyed, there was nothing left for him here. When he needed me most, I abandoned him, just as selfishly as I betrayed you. I don't deserve to be loved by anyone. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about our marriage. Those 3 years were the best years of my life. Your kindness, your patience, your unconditional love. I only understand how precious all of that was now that it's gone. And by the time I realized it, it was far too late. I don't expect you to forgive me. I know my death won't bring you any peace. But I want you to know that in my final moments, my regret was real. I hope you can let go of the anger and move on with your life. Find someone who truly deserves you. I'm sorry, Ethan. Goodbye. Forever yours, Sophie." I finished the letter, and the tears I'd been holding back finally came. I wasn't crying for Sophie's death. I was crying for the love we once had, for the beautiful memories that had been tainted by betrayal and destroyed by revenge. I thought of her smile, of all the small moments we had shared, of the love I once felt so completely. And in its place, all I felt was a vast, hollow exhaustion. The end of my revenge was nothing but a cold, desolate wasteland. Sean was at the funeral. He looked like a ghost, gaunt, unshaven, a shadow of the confident man I had met at that reunion. I watched him from a distance. He looked like a stray dog, chased away, but circling back for one last glimpse of the woman who had both adored and abandoned him. The sight of him rekindled the embers of my rage. I would not allow him to be here to taint this final goodbye. I walked over to him. "You don't belong here," I said, my voice low and cold. Sean looked up, his eyes bloodshot with a mixture of grief and hatred. "You," he rasped. "You're the one who killed her." "Am I?" I shot back. "Or was it the man who seduced a married woman, professed his undying love, and then was cast aside the moment his fortune turned?" "I never abandoned her," he protested, his voice cracking. "She's the one who refused to see me after my company went under." His words confirmed my suspicions. In the end, Sophie had chosen self-preservation over their so-called epic love. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. Then you have even less right to be here, I said icily. Get out. A flicker of anger crossed Sean's face, then settled into a look of calm despair. You won, Ethan. You destroyed my company. You took everything from me. But you know what? You lost from the very beginning. Sophie never loved you. The one she could never get over was me. His words were meant to be daggers, and they were. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing my pain. Is that why she left you the second you had nothing left to offer? That hit home. A pained expression flashed across his face. I don't believe that. You must have threatened her, pressured her. Think whatever you want, I said with contempt. The fact is, when you needed her most, she abandoned you, just like she betrayed me. So much for your fated love. Sean's fist clenched. For a moment, I thought he was going to swing at me, but he restrained himself. Do you think this is over? Do you think revenge has made you happy? No, I answered honestly, but at least it made you pay. Now leave. This is your only warning. Sean shot me one last venomous look, glanced at Sophie's photograph, and then turned and walked away. I stood there, feeling a strange emptiness. On the surface, I had one, but deep down, I knew we were all losers in this story. After the service, I went to Sophie's grave alone. No flowers, no tears, just a heavy silence. I didn't know what to feel, anger at her betrayal or sorrow for her death. I stood there for a few minutes, then left. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. Ethan, it's Sean. I want you to know, Sophie's death isn't the end. This isn't over between us. I scoffed and deleted the message. Sean had nothing left. His threats were the pathetic whimpers of a broken man. And yet, a faint sense of unease lingered. A few days later, a package arrived at my office. Inside was a stack of photos of me and Sophie. Candids, wedding pictures. On every single one, our faces had been violently scratched out, smeared with red ink that looked like blood. A note was included. How does revenge taste? I knew it was Sean. He was trying to terrorize me, to make me feel the same loss and despair he felt. The pathetic thing was, he had no idea I'd already felt that the moment I learned of Sophie's betrayal. I put the photos away and called Rachel to let her know what Sean was doing. Should we call the police? She asked, concerned. No need, I said. He's just trying to scare me. He's lost everything. He's not a real threat. Be careful, Ethan, she advised. A man with nothing to lose can be dangerous. I appreciated her concern, but I dismissed Sean's threats. The game was over. He was just a sore loser, but I had severely underestimated the depths of his madness. One night, a week later, I was jolted awake by a frantic pounding on my apartment door. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but it grew louder, more insistent. Ethan, I know you're in there. Open the door. It was Sean's voice, slurred and raw. I got out of bed and looked through the peephole. Sean was standing there, disheveled, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He was clearly drunk. I grabbed my phone to call 911. Ethan, he screamed, his voice thick with rage. You destroyed my life. You destroyed Sophie. You have to pay. I didn't answer. I just waited. He continued to hammer on the door. You think you won. This is just the beginning. I'm going to make you feel real pain, the same way you made me feel it. Just then, I heard the faint click of a lighter, followed by the sound of liquid splashing against my door. Fire. He was trying to set the building on fire. I dialed 911 as I scrambled for the balcony, looking for an escape route. Suddenly, I heard a commotion in the hallway, shouting from my building's security guard, followed by Sean's curses. Minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance. The police arrived and subdued Sean. I stepped out of my apartment to see him pinned to the ground, his hands cuffed behind his back. When he saw me, his eyes filled with a terrifying, manic hatred. This isn't over, Ethan, he shrieked as the police dragged him away. You'll regret this. You'll regret everything. The police confirmed that he had brought a can of gasoline with the intent to commit arson. If security hadn't intervened, the outcome could have been catastrophic. Sean was arrested for attempted murder and ultimately sentenced to 10 years in prison. As I watched them take him away, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. This twisted saga of revenge had finally reached its dramatic, violent conclusion. But the emptiness in my heart remained, deeper and more vast than ever. In the months that followed, I focused on work, trying to piece my life back together. With Sean in prison and Sophie gone, The nightmare was finally over. But late at night, in the quiet of my apartment, the memories would still surface. Sophie's smile, the happiness we once shared, and the searing pain of her betrayal. The satisfaction I thought I'd feel from my revenge never came. All the anger and grief eventually faded, leaving behind only a dull, persistent ache. 6 months later, I moved. I sold my condo and my firm, and I left Chicago for a new city where no one knew my name. I started a small design studio, pouring all my energy into the one thing I still loved: architecture. Work became my therapy, my way of healing. Rachel would visit sometimes, bringing news from my old life. Sean was serving his time. Sophie's parents were slowly recovering from the loss of their daughter. Our old friends were all moving on with their lives. Listening to her, I felt a sense of detached calm, as if the people and events that had torn my life apart were now just characters in someone else's story. Slowly, day by day, the wound began to scar over. I started accepting invitations, making new friends, even going on a few dates. I wasn't ready for another serious relationship, but I was finally willing to let life back in. Sophie and Sean had left an indelible mark on me, but I learned that time, if it doesn't heal all wounds, at least makes them bearable. Revenge hadn't brought me peace. It had only brought more destruction and a deeper emptiness. True release, I was discovering, didn't come from settling scores. It came from letting go and, finally, moving forward.